Recently, I was in Israel for a tour of the Holy Lands. It was my second time there. I was leading a group from our church. And it was interesting being there and seeing how the Jews of Israel, especially the observant Jews, practiced the Sabbath. You see, on Friday evening, no matter what hotel we were in, no matter what part of the country we were in, at sundown, right before that, we would get a big influx of locals, people from the area who were observing the Sabbath, and they were coming to check into the hotel. They did this because strict observance of the Sabbath meant that they couldn't practice any work or do anything that could be considered labor from sundown on Friday through sundown on Saturday, the day that they practice the Sabbath. What this meant for all of us tourists who were there is that we were down one elevator because they would designate one elevator as the Shabbat elevator, the Sabbath elevator. And this elevator would run and stop at every single floor all the way up and then stop at every single floor all the way down, all for the purpose of avoiding pushing a button. Because pushing a button could be seen as operating a machine, which could be seen as labor, and it would have been breaking the Sabbath. It's a weird thing, and it seemed kind of legalistic to some of us, but as I reflected on it and thought about it, it brought out a new dimension of the Sabbath for me. I've long thought that the Sabbath, one of the purposes of God putting it in place, was to remind us of our dependence on God. I kind of somewhat think that that's part of the purpose behind us having to sleep every night, that we have to put ourselves in this vulnerable position where we're not conscious and where anything could be happening around us and we don't know what's going on. And so there's this sense of acknowledgement in sleep that we are finite and that we depend upon an infinite God. And so what an amazing thought that on the Sabbath, the idea that you shouldn't work would also highlight our dependence. Because think about it. Think about it for 1 second. If you could do no work for one day, how helpless, how powerless, and how out of control you would feel. Just something as simple as pushing the button on an elevator. Did you know that most elevators do not even have a connection between the door close button and any kind of real action in the elevator? It's simply there for psychological purposes, to give you the sense and feeling of control so that when you push it, you're a little bit more patient, feeling that you enacted something to happen. So we live in this idea that we are self-contained, that we are self-determined, that we are independent, especially us Americans. And yet, the Sabbath is there to remind us that we're not so independent, that we're dependent on one another and we're dependent on this world that God has created for us, and we cannot thrive and we really can't even survive very well if we were totally isolated and dependent from others and from the world. So just the simple act of not pushing a button on an elevator gives the sense of those who are practicing Sabbath that they're not in control of their life. They have to ride that elevator every single floor until they reach theirs. Or they might have to ride all the way down to get to a different floor if it's going the opposite direction before they ride it back up to the floor they're trying to get to. What an amazing thing for us to reflect and think about in this time where we all have had our illusion of control torn out from us. And we're stuck in our homes with people making decisions for us and people trying to do what's best to protect our society. Let us remember that this is the actual state that we're always in. And the illusion of control that we built for ourselves is just that. It's an illusion. And if we were to practice Sabbath once a week, if we were to begin to actually re-implement this biblical principle, this biblical practice back into our lives, how much we would learn about our dependence on God and our dependence on the world that He's created around us. Let us pray to God that He would create this kind of a perspective and this kind of spirit within us even during this crisis. Come back tomorrow and we'll look some more at what the Sabbath means for us during this time.